What if everything you believe about the strength of the US dollar, so-called safest currency on Earth, isn't just wrong, but deliberately designed to fail on a schedule? What if the green paper in your wallet and the digits glowing in your banking app were never symbols of stability, but were actually placeholders in a global shell game? A game built to keep you calm while the value beneath quietly vanishes. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the hidden mechanism that props up the dollar. This is the invisible plumbing of modern finance that 99% of people will never, ever see. And no, it's not inflation. It's not government spending. It's something much deeper, colder, and far more dangerous. It's a shadow system built on leveraged debt and invisible bets, worth more than the entire world's total wealth. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments below, because this story touches every single paycheck, every mortgage, every retirement fund on the planet. And make sure you subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Because what you're about to hear is what central bankers whisper about behind closed doors. This is the mechanism that makes the dollar look alive even as it quietly collapses from within. To understand this illusion, you have to understand that the dollar's history isn't about faith. It's about control. Let's go back to a pivotal moment, August 15th, 1971. That was the night President Nixon went on television and ended the convertibility of the US dollar to gold. He called it a temporary suspension, but it quickly became permanent. In that single moment, money stopped being something of intrinsic value and became something simply declared into existence by a government. That was the first major fracture in the system. With the gold backing gone, the world needed a new anchor to keep the dollar at the center of global finance. So, in 1974, the US struck a monumental deal with Saudi Arabia. From that point on, every barrel of oil sold anywhere in the world would be priced in US dollars. This was the birth of the petrodollar system. In effect, oil replaced gold as the foundation of American economic power. If you wanted to buy oil, you first had to buy dollars. And it worked for a while. But this new mechanism had a hidden cost. It tied the dollar's survival to the global demand for debt. See? When demand for dollars means demand for debt, Wall Street gets very creative. They built a machine to create debt endlessly. By the 1980s, financial deregulation opened the floodgates for a new kind of banking. Credit was no longer just a tool. It became a product to be manufactured and sold. Mortgages were sliced up, bundled into complex securities, and sold off to investors around the world. Derivatives bets on the value of other assets multiplied like living organisms. Soon, for every real dollar in the system, there were $100 in claims on that same value. It was a tower of leverage built on a tiny foundation of actual money. Each generation was told the same thing. This time is different. The new financial products were sophisticated. The risk was managed. The system was stable. Until it wasn't. In 2008, the machine finally cracked. The collapse of Lehman Brothers was the headline, but the real crisis was happening in the shadows. The invisible leverage inside the shadow banking system had frozen solid. The entire global financial system was just hours from complete implosion. To stop the contagion, the Federal Reserve stepped in and printed over $16 trillion in emergency liquidity. That's more than the entire U.S. gross domestic product at the time. They told us it was a rescue. They told us it was to save Main Street. But it was really a transformation. But here's the twist that most people never hear. The Federal Reserve docenti actually create most of the money in our modern financial system. The shadow banking system does. This happens through a complex web of collateralized debt, derivatives, and something called the repo market. The repo market is like a giant overnight pawn shop for financial institutions. Every time a bank pledges an asset, like a treasury bond, to borrow money overnight, that pledge effectively becomes new liquidity. That IOU is treated and counted as money. Now, imagine trillions of dollars worth of these IOUs swirling around the planet every single second. Each one depending on the next to keep its promise. That is the true backbone of the modern dollar. It's not gold. It's not even oil anymore. It's debt built on top of more debt. Belief built on top of more belief. And this fragile system almost broke again, right before the pandemic. In late 2019, something terrifying happened that barely made the news. The repo rates, the interest rates for this crucial overnight borrowing, suddenly spiked from a normal 2% all the way to 10%. The system was choking. It was running out of high-quality collateral to post for loans. The plumbing was seizing up. Within weeks, the Fed quietly began injecting $9 trillion to stabilize it. Long before anyone had heard of COVID-19, they called it not QE, but it was a massive bailout of a system on the brink. Then came 2020. The pandemic didn't destroy the dollar. In a strange way, it saved the mechanism by providing the perfect cover story for the largest liquidity injection in human history. You might think it's paper, or maybe just numbers in a bank account, but the truth is far stranger and a lot more fragile. Today, we're diving deep into the shadow banking system, the hidden engine that powers the global economy. And what we'll uncover might just change the way you see money forever. Most people believe that when they deposit a dollar, it sits safely in a vault. But in the real world, every modern dollar begins its life as a form of debt. And that's just the beginning. There's a hidden layer to our financial world, a shadow system that operates beyond the view of most regulators and almost everyone else. This system doesn't just use debt. It has perfected the art of turning promises into currency. It all starts with something called a repurchase agreement, or repo. Think of it like a high-stakes pawn shop for giant financial institutions. A bank needs cash overnight, so it offers a high-quality asset like a U.S. Treasury bond as collateral to another institution. In return, it gets a short-term loan. The next day, it buys back its bond for a slightly higher price. Simple, right? But here's the twist. The institution that received the bond doesn't just let it sit there. It can use that same bond as collateral for its own loan. This is called rehypothecation. Suddenly, one single treasury bond isn't just backing one loan, it's underpinning dozens of them, creating layers upon layers of synthetic money. It's like making a photocopy of a key, then making a photocopy of the photocopy. Each copy can open a new door, but none of them are the original. The same asset gets pledged, repledged, and reused across the system, creating a vast network of digital IOUs. To give you a sense of scale, in 2023, the global repo market was handling around $15 trillion in transactions every single day. That's equivalent to the entire US economy turning over in digital promises from sunrise to sunset. This system works perfectly as long as everyone trusts that the person on the other end of the deal will pay them back. But what happens when that trust disappears? The whole pyramid of promises collapses. Liquidity, the lifeblood of the market, can evaporate in hours, not days. This is why you constantly hear about the Federal Reserve stepping in. Their interventions aren't just about injecting cash. They're about reinflating belief. They are the ultimate guarantor, the one entity that can promise to make everyone whole when the chain of private promises breaks. Now, let's talk about another piece of this puzzle: derivatives. Originally, derivatives were created as a form of insurance, a way to reduce risk. A farmer could use a derivative to lock in a price for his crops, protecting him from a sudden price drop. But in the hands of Wall Street, they became something else entirely. They became tools for speculation, magnifying risk on a global scale. By 2007, on the eve of the financial crisis, the notional value of all derivatives in the world was estimated at $600 trillion. That's 6 times the entire global GDP at the time. Today, that number is closer to 700 trillion. This has created a web of financial connections so dense and so tangled that one institution's failure can trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. Remember when Lehman Brothers collapsed in 2008? The initial loss wasn't the biggest problem. The real shock was the uncertainty. No one knew who was exposed to Lehman's worthless promises. Every bank was connected to every other bank through this invisible web of derivatives. Who owed what to whom? The fear wasn't just about losing money. It was about the system itself freezing up because no one could trust their trading partners. That's the true danger of the shadow system. Not ignorance of the numbers, but ignorance of the connections. So, let's trace the cycle. It's a self-feeding loop that looks brilliant on the way up and terrifying on the way down. First, debt is created. This debt is then used to buy assets, which serve as collateral. This collateral is then used to fuel more loans through the repo market. These repo loans create what we call shadow dollars, those synthetic IOUs we talked about. These shadow dollars are then used to buy more assets, like stocks and real estate, inflating their prices. And guess what? Those rising asset prices make it easier to justify taking on even more debt. The cycle begins again, bigger and faster. It's a beautiful, self-perpetuating machine until one link breaks. When a major player defaults, or when confidence suddenly evaporates, the entire process slams into reverse. collateral values plummet, lenders pull back, the shadow dollars disappear, asset prices crash. It's a cascade of deleveraging that happens in a flash. In 2008, the meltdown took about 90 days to fully unfold. In today's hyper-digital economy, where transactions happen at the speed of light, a similar collapse could take 9 minutes. This brings us to the modern central banker. What's their most powerful tool? It's not the printing press, as many believe. It's the press conference. Every word they speak is carefully chosen, weighed, and scripted. Their primary job is to manage psychology, to maintain confidence in the system. Because if the public, the investors, and the institutions stop believing, the entire mechanism grinds to a halt. That's why the word stability is repeated like a mantra. The appearance of calm has become the policy itself. They tell us everything is under control, that the fundamentals are strong. But beneath this placid surface, the cracks are widening. According to the Bank for International Settlements, 9 U.S. banks are hiding roughly $14 trillion in off-balance sheet dollar debt. This is debt that doesn't show up on their official books, but is very, very real. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve's own balance sheet has ballooned to over $8.5 trillion. What is that? It's the accumulated residue of every bailout, every crisis intervention stitched together over the decades. Each rescue mission buys us more time, but it also injects more fragility into the system. It makes the next crisis inevitable and ensures that the next rescue will have to be even larger, faster, and more global than the last. And now, we're on the cusp of another revolution. Digital currencies, central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, promise instant transactions and greater efficiency. But they also offer the potential for unprecedented control. Imagine a system where every credit, every bailout, and every restriction can be executed in real time. A financial crisis could be contained in seconds, but your economic freedom could also be limited with the flip of a switch. Ultimately, the strength of the dollar and the entire global financial system built upon it is an illusion of perpetual motion. It must constantly expand to survive. More debt, more liquidity, more belief. If it stops growing, the whole mechanism collapses under its own weight. It's a system that fundamentally relies on denying reality. But denial always has a price. When value is built on faith alone, honesty becomes a liability, and the bill for tomorrow just keeps getting heavier. History is filled with cautionary tales. The Roman Empire debased its silver coins until they were worthless. Revolutionary France printed assignats backed by confiscated land until they triggered hyperinflation. In 1971, the U.S. unilaterally severed the dollar's last link to gold, ushering in our current era of pure fiat currency. Every empire, every nation, believes it's the exception to the rule. Sound familiar? The next breakdown won't announce itself with blaring sirens and panicked news anchors. It will likely come as a flicker on a screen. The question is not if it happens, but whether we'll recognize it when it does. If you've watched this far, You read part of a very small group of people who are willing to look behind the curtain and understand how fragile this illusion really is.